though it is something that is not discussed often. Have you ever wondered how connections with each other impact sustainability on our planet? How the threads of our relationships shape the fabric of our planet's health? In our sustainable journey, we often focus on the tangible things: policy changes, innovations, environmental conservation efforts, all necessary components of sustainable development. But it's just as critical to remember that we do not undervalue the profound impact of human relationships and social dynamics in our collective well being. But don't take it from me. I'm very excited for today's episode. We were able to bring on certified connection coach, author, and insightful relationship expert Kat Velos to discuss how, by improving our relationships, the way we relate to others, we can take significant steps toward creating a more sustainable and harmonious world. Super excited for this. We've got a great guest today. I met Kat through, and shout out to Atlanta Solopreneurs Club. I met Kat through a speaking event that the club was hosting, and there was just so many great takeaways from the conversation there that I knew I wanted to have you on the show. She's just going to be the perfect person to dive into the social capital of sustainability. We've talked a lot about entrepreneurship on the show. We've talked a lot about the innovations that some of my other guests have had on, but I really have wanted to dive into the social sphere for a while now, and Kat is going to be the perfect person as a relationship coach to give us a different perspective on things. I'll go ahead and dive into it. So, as a relationship coach, you talk a lot about how to build meaningful connections outside of a typical, hey, how are you?
Yeah, so great question. And for any listeners, if this is our first time meeting, first time being introduced, I also want to clarify that the element of relationships that I focus on are platonic connections. So typically that looks like friendships in your personal life or in professional life as well. So we'll touch on both of those things, but it's different from like when people hear relationships, they often just think of romance and like dating and things like that. I don't do dating, like romance is for other experts. I focus on friendship and community. So with that being said, in this day and age with social media, with all of the different ways that technology claims to be connecting us more and more to each other, sometimes it helps us absolutely to connect to each other and to find those new connections. It's a wonderful, wonderful way to find community, especially through different interest groups online. But also the flip side of that is that we know it's also an endless array of distractions, and it can unfortunately distract us from the things that we want to be focusing on and the connections we want to be fostering and building. And so it really does take a clear dedication and intentionality in how people are using these tools to make sure that we don't build a lot of parasocial relationships, which is something I talk about in the book, and that we are really being purposeful in how we use them to make sure that whether you're focusing on turning an online acquaintance into a real friend, which I have a guide for on my blog, or whether it's through using those interactions you have with colleagues or potential colleagues on something like LinkedIn to go beyond the feed, like go beyond the scroll, and to actually then develop something more significant with each other. One of the best ways to do that, which you touched on there, Vance, is by being intentional about the questions that we use with each other. And I have a post that's gone viral a couple of times now called Alternatives to How Are You? Because one of the things that I personally have observed and find frustrating, and apparently a lot of other people feel the same way, is that we use these three words, how are you, in our society. We make it do a lot of lifting. Sometimes we use it as a greeting. Sometimes we use it as a question. Sometimes when it's used as a greeting, we don't mean it as a question. We actually are just saying hello. And my beef with that is that sometimes we can't tell the difference. And unfortunately, because it's used as a greeting, sometimes it's a missed opportunity to actually have the check-in that we want to be having with people. And so the alternatives to how are you are, have a whole year's worth in the calendar of different questions that we can open conversations with, depending on the type of interaction we're trying to create. And sometimes you don't even need to make it a question. A statement is perfectly fine to just say like, hey, it's good to see you this morning, and leave it at that. Or to say like, hey, I'd love to hear how your week has been going, which is very clearly an inquiry. Whereas how are you is sometimes like, you're just supposed to say, fine, how are you? And it's over. And it doesn't necessarily provoke the level of depth and disclosure that a differently worded question might do.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I like that. That point of like we miss the opportunity because sometimes you really do want someone to ask you how you feel and feel like you
Yeah.
like a safe space, but it's just especially at work and stuff, it doesn't always feel like you get the opportunity to do that. I obviously need to get the calendar because I do think it would be nice to have a whole list of different alternatives to that.
I'll give you a couple right now because I actually made a workplace version of the alternatives to how are you, like calendar grid. So some of those, yeah, like I said, could just be a statement like it's great to connect with you again. I've been looking forward to this chat. Or it can be something short, like what's the vibe today? Or it can be something more deep, like what has been on your mind lately that you haven't had a chance to talk about? Or what's something that's been going well and something that you would change or that you wish was different? And so those kinds of questions that are, they could be open-ended or they could be really specific, but they get at inviting someone to share something that has a little bit more significance for them.
I love that. Yeah,
Mhm.
just hearing you say those, like it's so much different. It makes so much more of a difference. So as you guys see, Kat is the person who is going to help you really like dive deeper into connecting with people when it comes to the modern day, not just in sustainability and the focus of the show, but I'll just say just in general, vulnerability can almost be looked down upon, synonymous with weak, when I really think it's the opposite. It takes a lot of strength to be vulnerable. Um,
Mhm.
and that is something that we're going to need, especially as we move forward and try to work to resolve the issues that we're facing as a planet. Vulnerability and resilience go hand in hand. And I do think that we're going to need a lot more of that moving forward. So I'll go ahead and that leads right into the next question. In your opinion, how do you think we can work together towards a common goal, such as adapting to the climate crisis or um, peeling back the layers of history and the harsh truths of reality that is humanity and the way we've treated each other. How do you think we can work towards um, being vulnerable with each other for the sake of a common goal, but also knowing that it takes a bit of stepping outside of ourselves. How do we step outside of ourselves and say, okay, we have to look at the situation that is present and what can we do to move forward?
Yeah. I mean, the situation that we're in is pretty grim climate wise. And as we know from science, it's only going to get more complicated and more difficult. And it's going to be deeply vital for us to be able to work together as a species of human beings collaborating. I mean, we made this problem, and we are the ones that we have to rely on to survive the coming changes. Um, One of the interesting things about crises, and this is documented quite well in a book by Sebastian Junger called Tribe, is that when humans are in situations of a time of crisis and calamity, one of the things about us is that you can go one of two ways. You can pull together and work together to get through it, or unfortunately, usually for a smaller percentage of people, will go into total scarcity mindset and competition mindset, and then seek to like push other humans out of the way or trample over other humans in order to get the resources. Obviously, that is not the vision that we all hope and want for. Much more enjoyable and successful would be to work together to achieve our common goals and to pull together. And we've seen this in a variety of different cases that he documents in the book, ranging from people living through war, people living through natural disasters. And we know that more natural disasters are coming to our world as a result of the climate crisis. And so hopefully we will discover the ways in which we need to pull together and form more successful cooperative communities before we get to a place of total calamity. It's just up to each person to make that decision.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. There's a lot
Illusions
of
of
points I'll
division
go back to
threaten
later.
our very existence. We all know the truth. More connects us than separates us. But in times of crisis, the wise build bridges, while the foolish build barriers. We must find a way to look after one another as if we were one single tribe.